for Affordable Schools. Thanks for inviting me. I want to talk about 6 main concerns that I have. This blistering levy is completely unnecessary. The touted smaller chunk of 75% school property tax hike at $2.47 added to the current $3.27 surpasses the 2015 voter-rejected $98 million bond at $206 a thousand. Some smaller chunk, the high school not so important now. The capital levy is exorbitant because it must be paid in 6 years. The 6-year payment compares to paying off a home mortgage and the time ordinarily used to pay off a car loan. The county, port, city, hospital taxes, fire district taxes, utility taxes up 35% are hammering businesses, renters, homeowners, and now a 75% increase in your property taxes for schools. Aging homeowners becoming retired have tax hikes with property values increasing, but not their incomes increasing. Have you talked to many older citizens who say they can afford this massive 75% school tax hike? Seniors just a few dollars over the $40,000 limit won't qualify. How will parents of 51% of the Port Angeles School District students using free or reduced lunches pay this tax?
Could you put the mic closer to your mouth? Thank you.
Levy proponents argue in our county's online voter guide, $47 million will fix overcrowding at the 5 elementary schools and achieve compliance with the new state law ordering lower class sizes. The Attorney General clarifies, this measure I-1351 would direct the legislature to allocate funds to reduce class sizes. And nothing in the school funding law requires school districts to maintain a particular classroom teacher-to-student ratio. State orders don't exist. The truth about overcrowding. The district website contains a very thorough demographic study in 2008. The district lost 20% of students between 1997 and 2007. Current enrollment totals 1,254 students less than the peak in the 1990 time frame. Current student enrollment amounts to almost 500 students less than the 2008 study predictions for this year. Current PASD enrollment, the board closed Fairview in 2007 because of the 1997 to 2007 20% enrollment drop. Current elementary school enrollment is 22 students less than 2007. When they closed Fairview, logically, how could all 5 elementary schools be overcrowded? Modular construction. After a modular company presentation, the school board learned about modular construction meeting all state requirements, saving 35% or more due to construction efficiencies. The 2016 Facilities Committee recommendation stated any and all reasonable and high-quality permanent construction, including modular, will be considered. The levy plan, as written, excludes this modular construction. Why is that? Number 5, the hazard mitigation. The number 1 goal of the district's hazard mitigation plan states reducing threats to life and safety is the highest priority. For Port Angeles School District and states all facilities are at very high risk. Instead, the school board asks you to pay for additional smaller class sizes at the highest construction cost, not modular costs. Which should be the priority? Smaller class sizes for life and safety. Other alternatives. Tom Carver, Washington Superintendent of Public Instruction Facilities, advises remodeling always costs less than new construction. The opposition argues Fairview would require startup costs and more administrative costs. This is the first time I've ever heard that they're worried about administrative costs. 300 more students at Stevens will also require more staff and additional administrators. Fairview's renovation for $3 to $5 million will save the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. Opposition argues Fairview is too far away. Fairview is a district school.
And that'll be time. Is that your phone or mine that make that sound? Alright, so like I said, after Steve gets his initial 5 minutes, if there's time, then we'll allow you to go back to it, okay? Steve, it's your turn. That 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to stay seated, not out of disrespect, just it's easier to look at my notes here. So in 2015, voters said no to a $98 million bond to rebuild the high school. They said, it's too much money on one building. Have a long-term plan for all facilities, not just the high school. Go slower, go in stages. We don't like the millions in bond interest because like a $98 million mortgage, it would likely cost about $181 million over the 25-year lifespan of the mortgage. Keep your vocational programs strong and robust. Be efficient and remodel where you can. Find a way to make a school project contribute to local jobs and keep our existing businesses here. And we want facilities that are safe. Voters were heard, and your district has outlined a long-term facilities plan using exactly this input. Now we know the longer we wait, the more costs will escalate, and the more we kick the can down the road, the more it's going to cost us in the future. So why Stevens Middle School and why now? Stevens is the crucial first step because it allows moving 6th grade back to the middle school where it used to be, and which is the predominant model in the U.S., and that tends to produce the best student outcomes. This then provides, at no extra cost, classrooms at our overcrowded elementary schools where even the portables are full, avoiding the need to build an additional school or recommission an old one. Stevens' infrastructure is over 50 years old. It's unlikely to withstand an earthquake. It's crowded. It's uninsulated in much of the building. It doesn't even have fire sprinklers in most areas. The building can be saved and remodeled, but it needs heavy modernization, it needs major expansion, and it needs a new site plan for safety. If you had been at City Council last week and heard the 12-year-old Boy Scout stand up unprompted to let everyone know what the building is like to go to school in and what it would mean for kids and teachers to have a refurbished school, you'd be sold. And what we hear is you guys yelled and screamed about how badly the high school needed to be replaced. Now suddenly it doesn't. What's changed? And the short answer is nothing has changed. It still needs to be heavily modernized and much of it needs to be replaced. But first things first, voters said no. That must be respected. What has changed since 2015 are some of the other circumstances. Second, in polling the high school science department about what they would need if we had a portion of our funds to spend there, they said, don't. We will make it work until you get back to us, but spend all the resources this round on doing one project and doing it right. Maintenance also says they can hold her together for a while longer. Third, Stevens was always the next step in our facilities plan, so it was the logical next choice if voters aren't prepared to tackle the high school yet. Then, thus, the high school was moved to from the front of the plan to the back. But it's still vital and it's still there. We just need to face reality and be patient. After 2015, voters mandated by initiative that we provide smaller class sizes at the elementary levels starting in 2018. Last summer, the legislature put on hold the penalties for non-compliance because districts couldn't afford to add elementary schools at $40 million a pop. But they kept the funding for smaller class sizes if districts could find the space. Smaller class sizes mean more classrooms are needed, right? And our district has already been working that way in anticipation of complying with this. So if we could find a way to do needed overhaul at the middle school that all kids will use as they pass through our system, and in the same stroke, free up the classrooms that allow us to give our elementary kids a better education while not asking local taxpayers for additional funds, wouldn't that make sense? Plus, once the smaller class sizes become the norm, it's a pretty good bet that there will be someday penalties for non-compliance. And we could be way out in front of this one and already be there when that time comes. Plus, it's the will of the people, so there's that. Now going forward with the 3-stage 12-year plan that allows voters to choose to bond for a new high school at the end, or to keep going beyond that, step by step with levies, and give Port Angeles a cycle of progress and renewal in our public schools. And schools are the very first words out of people's mouths when they're looking at moving here, because doctors here, becoming doctors here, starting businesses here, or just talking about how they feel about their hometown. Now, a very exciting component to the plan is the desire to use cross-laminated timber, which is a modular mass timber building panel that greatly reduces the construction time frame and which could help in the effort to incubate the industry and create jobs here. If the school district can be part of the effort to use our own trees, harvested by our own people, manufactured into CLT by our own workers, in our own public buildings, that's a pretty rosy scenario. It's a ways off, but the vision is there. Great schools, as we know, are made by great teachers, but they need modern, safe buildings that can adapt to teaching and learning in the future, and a great economy needs great schools. I hope you'll support us.
Thank you. No alarms went off. Good timing. Alrighty, so Dan, you didn't look like you were done. Do you want an additional minute? And then Steve, if you wanted an additional minute after Dan, then I'll let you both have it.
All I really had left to say there was that when we actually have genuine overcrowding, then Fairview could become another elementary school. The $47 million levy, scorching 75% tax hike, is really completely unnecessary at this point. And we'd like you to take a look at our Stop 75% tax.com. We have a very extensive website that we put together, actually most of the facts taken from the school district's site, as well as the Collin County Health Assessment.
Okay. And then Steve, an additional minute for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in school taxation right now, the biggest of which is what's happening with the McCleary decision. And we are scheduled in 2019 in our school district for our P&O levy, which is the one that we passed last year, to go down from $3.20 per thousand to $1.50 per thousand. So it's going to go down by more than 100% or more than 50%, depending on how you want to do the math. That is to be replaced by school taxes from the state level, but it won't be completely replaced. So our local property or program and operations levy is likely, highly likely at this point, to be somewhere between 38 and 60 cents per thousand less than it is in 2017. Now you would add a levy to do school modernization on top of that. So this is a tax increase, and we need to be cautious and respectful about asking taxpayers for a new tax. But that should substantially soften the blow. Now it is causing dilated pupils at the school district because it means close to $5 million of shortfall in our operations revenue. But it is going to be a relieving of the burden on taxpayers at that.
I hear an alarm going off. So, now, just for clarification, P&O, that's programs and operations.
Right.
Okay.
AKA M&O. We used to refer to it as maintenance and operations, but programs are actually the primary
Okay.
part of that funding stream.
All right. So first question, I'm going to start over on this side of the room. Who's got the first question over here as far as membership goes? No questions over here? Kai?
I wanted to hear a little bit more about possibilities to lower the cost of the project and what was looked at. And I know you are not on the school board yourself, but something tells me that you have fairly close contacts to the school board, so you might be able to enlighten us. Number one, the question of putting Fairview back into operation and what that would cost. That was an elementary school originally, not that long ago, and it could be one again if one spent the money to bring it back up to snuff. And children were bused out there only 12 years ago, so it is possible to do that. And the other one is modular construction. I recall, and I think it was you or somebody else in December when you were all here, somebody asked, well, what about Plan B if this gets turned down? And the answer was, well, for $200,000 we could put up a roughly 2,000 square foot modular prefabricated building, which is $100 a square foot, compared to 400 to 500, which is what the new construction costs. And why that was rejected, or what consideration was given to using that for at least part of the need for new square footage.
So the answer to Fairview is that Fairview is a very small school. It's a 2-unit school, which means there's only 2 grades. There's only 2 classes per grade. So in terms of how it fits in the district footprint, that it really doesn't fit in the district footprint, and it is always less money to remodel than it is to build new construction. But if you don't have to add an entirely new footprint to the district, and you can do all of these other things with one stroke, and a new part of the footprint, by the way, that would be way out where Fairview is. Now I know it's not a huge. My kids went to Fairview. My kids actually were consolidated out of Fairview, so I get what it's like to have a small school. But a very small school is extremely inefficient, and it really isn't the best use of dollars to do that. And Fairview really isn't a school that would fit well if we do have some expansion in the area. And it is. I mean, it needs a ton of work. So. So Fairview is just a really inefficient thing to try to plug back into the district. And it would sort of add this node out there that doesn't fit in the traffic pattern anyway. And I really don't think that it would save anything to do that. I think it'd actually be a cost center to add a whole new school footprint and the administrators that go along with it. Yes, it will add some new footprint and some new administrators, probably one extra administrator to move 6th grade back to the middle school, but all those teachers are already in the district. And so we didn't think it was a responsible thing to add a whole new footprint to do that. In terms of modulars or portables, yeah, it's actually closer to $300,000 to add one of the portable units that you're talking about. But their long-term durability and the feel of people who look at Port Angeles and the feelings of people who use those, I don't think that's the statement we want to make about what our school district is a forest of portables.
And our timer's holding the stop sign. No, I'm gonna, once Dan's had a chance to answer, I'll let you go back and finish. But I want to make sure everybody gets as much time as possible. So Dan, your turn, 2 minutes.
This is not about feelings. This is about fact, logic, and reason. When you look at Fairview, which was a perfectly good neighborhood school, kindergarten through 6, it has lots of classrooms. I think there's 12 classrooms there, a gym, an area for food, and so on. If there was a necessary increase in the actual buildings, there's lots of room there to put more classrooms there. Secondly, if you look at the demographics here, most of the growth is on the eastern side of Port Angeles. So it does make a lot of sense to use that if that square footage is actually needed. The cost to renovate that school and bring it right up to 100%, at least from the construction experts that I've contacted, is around $3 to $5 million, and that's one heck of a lot less than what we're talking here. So that's one of the things we really need to look at. And the cost of modulars, which now they're starting to come this way, are so much a great savings that that's one thing, if needed, that should be considered. As far as this cross-laminated timber, we don't have any facilities here right now. So that's kind of a hook to say, well, gee, this is going to be great. I'll have to look at another incubator project like we've seen in other places in this district. So that's not something, reason to vote for. As far as the way schools look and so on, it's what takes place in the classroom, not what the school looks like. And over the period of time, there's been $106 million that's taken from the taxpayers to maintain and operate the schools, with very little, maybe only 10% over the period of the last 16 years in every budget spent on actual, renovation parts that are needed.
And timer's going off. Okay. Steve, do you want another minute to finish what you were saying?
Sure. One question that I would have is, I'm wondering where you are on the issue, because on one side, in your opening comments, you say the classrooms are not overcrowded, thus we don't need more classrooms, and then you say, well, why don't we just reopen Fairview? So I'm not sure where those two things square with each other, but it is about feelings. All of the community is about feelings. It also has to be about logic and good planning and strategy. But you do, the way people feel about community is the primary economic driver in an area. And if you ignore that and you simply look for the cheapest and you race to the bottom in terms of how little you can spend on your facilities, that speaks to what you're investing in your infrastructure. In this country right now, we're about infrastructure, and that's the thing we know we need to address. And how much we put into it speaks to how much we care about it, and also leads to how we feel about it. Feeling is why people spend money. Feeling is why people move to a place. So to ignore that completely is an economically bad decision.
Well, looking at Fairview, I mentioned that if we actually had to do this, then that's an option. It's another alternative to look at. So that's my comment about Fairview. And when you look at the schools themselves, as I mentioned in the hazard mitigation report that they talked about, well, that was supposed to be the most important thing that we have going. So why hasn't that type of care for our infrastructure been going on? It just hasn't. So now you come down to a point, here we are, and there's crises of this. We do have the ability to take care of that. So that's,
Okay, so now I want to ask, just for clarification, when I was a kid and we talked about a modular classroom, that was basically a mobile home used as a classroom. Is that the way, and that's what, me as a voter, that's what I have pictured in my head. Is that the case? What are modern day modular rooms like? So if both of you can take a couple of minutes and talk to that, I'd appreciate it. Who started off answering questions first? Was it Dan or Steve? I'll let Steve, if you can go first this time, then we'll let Dan.
Yeah, modular actually kind of encompasses a spectrum of construction. Anything from something that arrives on axles and gets set up like a mobile home, to something that's constructed in panels in a prefabricated, factory environment. And the cost per square foot varies pretty dramatically when you move from the mobile style modular or the temporary building up to the prefabricated tilt-up kind of modular. And they are fairly, they're manufactured in a similar way. It just depends on whether you put them together on site. There are a couple of modular projects in Washington State, and I want to be clear that it is not excluded as part of the thought process that if a modular, prefabricated construction were to be a substantial cost savings and it offered the same durability, the same longevity, and the same usefulness as conventional construction, of course it needs to be considered. But to have a blanket statement that it'll automatically save you and get you down to $100 a square foot, or that it'll save you 35%, just really isn't correct when you sort of survey what they cost to put out there. If you talk to architects about it, or if you go look at the two biggest modular school projects, one's in Marysville, it's a science and technology magnet school. They're pretty clear that their building is equipment. It's not permanent construction. And the benefit for them in doing it is that's one of their major employers in the area is their modular construction industry. But I think modular is something that the district is, we had a presentation on it when we were doing the facilities planning. It's not something that's excluded from the thought process, but there probably is a reason if you don't see this magically going up all over the place in school districts and public buildings everywhere. It's not a magical 35% savings. It does save substantially in time. So where it fits, it probably needs to be considered in the mix. But it's not a panacea.
And Dan.
yes, I would respectfully disagree. We're not talking about portables with axles and tires on it and driving them in. Modulars are not part of that equation at all. Modulars are built in schools and buildings, public buildings, fire stations, hospitals, up to 4-story buildings. They're not something that's just a throwaway thing that is alluded to. So the cost savings is substantial, it's real, and should be considered. That they're built, as I said, all over the place. There's more than just 2 schools in the state of Washington, and school districts are looking at that more and more because of costs. So that's something that really should be on the front burner when we can save about 35% compared to the $500 a square foot that you hear all the time. And $100 a square foot might be for a portable that they drive in like a trailer and pop it down. But if you look at any building that's maintained from when they're built, went on the web and looked at my brother's school. It was built in 1919 in Bangor, Maine. Well, I could see the renovations is still an elementary school. New windows, new heating, those things are renovations that need to take place at any school continually, not just, well, after it's deteriorated to a point where, then it falls down. There's plenty of studies that shows that schools all over the country. There's 5,000 high schools now that were built before 1950 and they're still being used. So it's how you manage your money to upgrade schools and renovate them over time.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions on this side? Over here. Betsy.
Earthquake factor is 7.29 possibility, but are modules also rated for earthquake safety when you put that into your plan and the cost of doing remodel?
So I'm going to restate that because I don't know if everybody heard it. Talk about the possible Cascade Rising event, an earthquake, something of that nature. This morning we all woke up. There was a 7.2 earthquake off the coast of Alaska, and there was tsunami warnings and everything like that. Modular construction isn't rated for disasters of that type of nature. Steve, you started off last time, so we're going to let Dan answer this one first.
Modular construction that's approved by the state of Washington has the same earthquake bracing that a typical school that's built, you know, the way they would come in for your $500 a square foot. So the state of Washington wouldn't even allow the schools right now to operate if they were unsafe and they were, you know, children were in danger. And besides what I talked about, the hazard mitigation plan, reducing threats to life and safety, is the highest priority for this school district. All facilities are at high risk. So then, shouldn't that be, you know, really the most important thing to take care of?
And Steve.
Betsy, the answer is yes. They're just as safe. You know, when you talk about a mobile home, it's designed, I tell my clients all the time, it's designed to go down the road at 60 miles an hour. So yes, they're pretty resilient. They're wood frame structures typically, and they're single story usually, which hold up pretty well seismically. But what your concern is, one of my main concerns, and I know it's one of the district's main concerns, is whether these buildings that we have currently are safe. And Stevens is not a building that was built during times of modern seismic code, which would be one of the major costs of remodeling. This project at Stevens would be largely a remodel. It would not be mostly new construction. The bigger square footage footprint would actually be the refurbishment of the existing building, which is not up to modern seismic code, and it is a significant concern. There are certain parts of that building that are newer. The music rooms are newer, and so they would be more modern, but the rest of the building does not even have fire suppression sprinklers in it. Let alone is it up to current seismic code. So that's a major concern, and that's why it's so expensive, because it really is expensive to retrofit a building for seismic safety. And many of the buildings in our district are in that same circumstance. So I do want to clarify, when we're talking about $500 or $600 a square foot, we're not talking about the building costs. It seems like a huge number. We're talking about the total project cost, and that's everything that's required to make a building learning ready on the first day the kids get there. So the building cost itself of the total project is only about 60%. Well, it's about 60%. The rest are other costs like architecture and engineering and planning and permitting, site improvements, and all of the other stuff that goes, you know, furniture, technology, wiring, all that stuff that goes into making a school ready to be used on day one. So about 60% of that is actually the building costs, and 40% of that $500 or $600 is actually the rest of the total project cost.
Anything else, Dan, on this? And then I'll throw it back to you again, Steve.
Just on the high school alone, built, I think it was 1950s, the local high school here. Well, that probably doesn't have, it is even more severe condition if you look at it than from the other schools that are built later. So actually the thrust, if you look at the amount of money here, this 47 million, you could, and I think the district has received 1.3 million for upgrades for that very reason for, I think it's Hamilton, I can't remember which school. But if you spent, if you had to or wanted to spend 47 million, you could go through these schools and upgrade them for earthquake bracing and so on with that money and still have money left over. You could even take care of the upgrades for Fairview and not have to build a bunch more classrooms. So to me, that's the way we should go.
Anything else, Steve?
We need a new middle school. The way to conventionally construct a brand new middle school, and if you had to start from the ground up, it would be about $70 million. And what we're asking for taxpayers here, is 46.7. So I think when you juxtapose what it actually costs to build a new middle school versus what is being asked in this measure, and the 5 other projects that come along with it at no extra cost, in clearing up more classroom space so you can have a better educational environment, smaller class sizes, lower student-to-teacher ratio at the elementary levels. It is a very efficient thing to do. It's 6 projects for the price of 1, basically. And it is significant in that it remodels a lot of an existing building versus just blowing one up and starting over. We do have other schools in the district, though, that are a real concern seismically. We just don't have, it's just not reasonable to ask the taxpayers to do all of that at once. We have something in the neighborhood of $250 to $300 million of work to do, but we're just going to have to take it one bite at a time. And it is going to be a cost to all of us. And I can say that we come advisedly and respectfully asking that we all share in this burden, because it is going to be a shared burden for us to do this. I do know that I pay the pizza guy when he comes more than what I will spend on this property tax if I'm an average taxpayer. So it'll be about $41 a month for a $200 home. It'll be in the low 50s for a $300 home per month, which is how a lot of people do their property tax payments through escrow, or somewhere between $495 and $610 a month for that $200,000 to $300,000 property owner, who would be the average person.
Alrighty. Next question on this side in the middle, sir.
Because of the horrific shootings in schools around the country, what has been addressed in terms of safety in this topic?
He's wondering about safety relative to the...
Safety. The question was because of, thinking about the horrible school shootings that have taken place around the country, is safety being addressed in these plans for the schools? So I think it's Steve's turn to go first. I forget. Yeah.
The answer is yes. Safety is one of the primary things to be addressed. Seismic safety, building security, fire suppression. Yes, those are definitely priorities in what needs to get done. Stevens is actually one of the more securable schools that we have because it's one building. And I don't want us to get out ahead of ourselves in terms of what style of construction we use or what methods or whether it's modular or conventional. None of that is even out there. What you have to do when you run a measure like this is ask the State Department of Public Instruction what the average costs are, or what sort of the median target costs are to build, and that's what you're required to go out for, because that's the responsible number to ask for. And then you escalate for when you actually are going to get to doing the construction. But absolutely, safety is a primary consideration, and the securability of the buildings, which is why it was so distressing to me that we were not willing to build a new high school, because that is an example of how to not be able to secure a school campus.
I guess from a terrorist aspect, having all the kids in one building with only two doors for exit is not my idea of security. I think what you have is where the classrooms are spread out and there's an attack on a school. It's a lot easier for kids to either lock down in one classroom or get out from the area or leave the area than it is to put everybody in one 3-story building. And I think that's pretty obvious. So as far as other security concerns at the different schools, do they all have cameras that monitor every angle from the school right now? The security systems are relatively inexpensive. We have them in one of our own facilities at our local club shooting range, and they're very inexpensive. And I think if the school districts don't have those, they should immediately put those in to look at safety for our kids. So there's just one aspect of safety that I can speak to.
Okay. Any other questions so far on this side or on this? Go ahead, sir.
Clarify something for me. You said the elementary schools must be, there has to be more schools because mandated, the state has mandated that you have smaller classrooms. Am I correct? And that we have not yet been penalized. When does that penalty kick in and how much is it?
It's going to be Dan.
Well, there's no penalty on school district. There's nobody to come down here and say, you know, we're going to penalize you so much money. I made that very clear in my statements that the state orders are, as far as local school districts, that's something the penalties are, you know, the legislature is being penalized by the Supreme Court, which in itself is ridiculous because you have three co-equal branches of government, one of putting a $100,000 a day penalty on another, and even the legislature says, right, we'll get to that. So that's as far as penalties concerned. There's no one that's going to come down to this district and say, you're going to be penalized and we're going to fine you so much money. It's just not the case. As far as the overcrowding and so forth and the mandates that we have to have smaller class sizes, you can look at information from the Brookings Institute and other high quality places that have looked at smaller class sizes. They're not a panacea for better education. It's an idea, and it hasn't actually worked in areas that have done that. So it's always a goal to try to reduce them a little bit. But there's nothing coming down from the state that says you have to do this. So that needs to be made very clear that we're not under some kind of threat here. They have to produce the money and other things that are necessary. As far as taxes go, if you get a decrease here and it goes up there, I can assure you that you're going to be paying a lot more taxes in the future, regardless of whether it's a bond levy here or from the state. Let's look at what is going on with the people in Port Angeles, the people that are having a tough time. I just looked in the paper and there was something else.
I'll give you a chance after Steve gets his 2 minutes. I'll give you a chance.
That's an excellent question, and up until this last summer, there were penalties for non-compliance. There potentially was a reduction in your apportionment for operations, and fortunately, the penalty was removed. I mean, and I think most people were of the same mind about that. It's not reasonable to ask districts to build grade schools at $40 million a pop so we can have smaller class sizes. Are the outcomes that much more amazing? Outcomes are better when you have smaller class sizes. And our district has been doing a very good job of actually working toward having smaller class sizes at the elementary levels. So the good news is no, there is not a penalty. That's right. There is not currently any kind of a problem that you're going to run into at this moment. It is still a voter-approved mandate. So it still makes sense to work in that direction, both because you know that's the current will of the voters, and it's likely that this issue will come up again. So should we plan for it? Yeah, we probably should plan for it. Educationally, is it better for younger kids? Yes, it makes more of an impact with the smaller children to have smaller class sizes, and so that's where we can drive our efforts. But if you flip this around, it's actually an opportunity, because when they removed the penalties, they kept the funding for smaller class sizes. So if we can make it happen, that we can have 17 kids in a class instead of 26 or 24, the funding is there from the state level for us to actually do that. So we've got an opportunity here with this project that can actually free up enough class space for us to do that, to do better with our younger kids. And really that's the goal, isn't it? What's best for kids and what's best for our community. So we have an opportunity to do that and sort of turn this thing on its head with this small class size initiative, because the funding is there and we can actually get to where we can capitalize on that.
Dan, do you want to finish what you're saying? Because the timer cut you off. Okay, all right. Now, help me out here, because because the capital budget was just passed, everything like that. Is there any money in that budget coming down to the schools to be able to help out with construction, things of that nature? I think it's your turn to go first, Steve.
No,
That's it.
there is no money currently coming from Clallam County taxpayers or Port Angeles School District taxpayers for facilities construction or remodel. Zero. There has been none since 2015, and our district actually has a history of paying these things off well in advance. So no, there is no money coming from local taxpayers, and no, there is no apportionment coming from the state level from the capital budget, because for you to receive any apportionment, you must have a bond or a levy in place with which you're using that money to pay down. So unless we have a measure, we get zip.
Dan?
Well, the $1 billion facilities that was just passed in Olympia, so there is money for actuals to aid in local school construction. One of the things about it, though, we talked to Tom Carver, is that local school districts must prove that there is an overcrowding situation in their district to receive matching funds. So they haven't proved that there's overcrowding. There's actually fewer students, as I mentioned, in elementary schools, 22 fewer students now than there were 10 years ago. So the overcrowding function is just not there.
That's actually not correct. You don't have to prove that you have an overcrowding problem. All you need to have is facilities that are past their service life that need renewal, or you need to build new facilities, and that's when you apply for state assistance funds, which in our case would be about 25% of the total project cost. So you don't have to prove that you're bursting at the seams. You just have to have buildings that are wearing out and need to replace them, just as you normally would in any commercial or public building situation. And the state looks at service life of buildings somewhere between the 30 and 40 year range, I believe. Is that right, Nolan? Or we're in the 40 years or so? Or are they up to 50 now with their normal service life range?
So it changed back in '94, because they went to 30-year life for a school before you could ask for state assistance again. Before that, it was 20 years. So these buildings, most of them were built, it was a 20-year life before you could ask for more state assistance. But again, in 1994, it went to 30-year life.
So when a building wears out and needs renewal, that's when you can ask for state assistance. And that's what the capital budget is for, is that assistance. But we would need to be paying most of the freight on our own locally before we would qualify for any of that help.
Dan, you look like you have something you want to say?
Buildings don't just wear out. As I mentioned, there are 5,000 high schools in the United States that are built before 1950. And thousands and thousands of other grade schools that were built way before then. The thing is that there's continuous renovation and earthquake upgrades, new heating, the new efficient heating systems, for example, new heat pumps that are very efficient, things like that. You don't have to put in all new ductwork. There's upgrades in plumbing that they can run along baseboards or in crown moldings and everything to take care of this sort of thing. Window upgrades. So buildings don't just wear out. Look at the homes around Port Angeles. People take care of them. They renovate them. They put new kitchens in and more insulation, etc., etc. So the idea that they just wear out and we have to throw them away is completely ridiculous. Our schools can be renovated, improved, and so forth without just completely mowing them down like they've done already in one school. So we need to think more clearly about this. Another thing that I did want to touch on was about the people in Port Angeles. I took a look in the paper. That was what I was thinking about. Rental units that are available for people that want to come here and work here. Well, there was only one. I looked at apartments as well as homes and so forth. There was only one available. So people will move to an area if they're jobs. They don't first look at a school. well, I'm gonna move there because they've got these beautiful iconic schools. They're gonna move here because they have a job. That's the first thing they're gonna look at. And if a doctor drives by a school and says, oh, that thing looks terrible, I'm not gonna bring my kids here. He could take his kids anywhere in the country if he wants to. So it's not about looks. It's about what goes on in the classroom, having a safe, warm, comfortable place for kids to learn.
Alrighty. We're getting close, we're coming up on 8:30. I'm willing to entertain a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes to allow for one more question and then closing statements.
So moved.
Alright, so I've got the motion. Do I get a second?
I'll second.
Alright, it's been moved and seconded that we extend the meeting for up to 15 minutes. All in favor? Any opposed? You guys could sound more energetic. Jeez. Come on. Alrighty, so we've extended the meeting by 15 minutes. Gayla, you have a question?
Dan, you mentioned jobs, and I was just thinking, this $47 million, is that going to be jobs for the people in this community are going to benefit from that? The electricians, the plumbers, the contractors, or all of those folks that are going to build this new school come from the Seattle area?
So I think it's, who answered first last time? I'm getting confused here.
I think I answered first last time.
Okay, so the question is for people, in case you couldn't hear, if this levy is approved and there's construction taking place, is it going to be local people that get hired to do the jobs, or is it going to be people coming from out of the area doing the jobs and taking the money back home? Is that it? Okay, so
the short answer to your question is yes. As many local subs as possible do get hired. And when you write your contract, you're not legally permitted to only allow local contractors to be selected. But you can write into your contract or your request for proposal that strong preference is given, or there's strong encouragement for use of local contractors. But you're not permitted to exclude all other contractors from other areas. We don't have a contractor in the area who's big enough to bond for a project of that size. The issue you run into is all contractors have to have a bond, and it has to be big enough to handle the project. You can get around that to a certain degree by breaking your project into smaller pieces if you want to try to phase it, if you want to try to make it easier for local folks to bid on. But we really don't have a general here who can handle a project of that size. We used to have a few who could come close, or who might be able to stretch it to get there. But the short answer is yes, it does employ, they do employ a lot of local subs, and it does create a lot of local work during the project time. And you can talk to folks who go up to the high school to watch their grandkids play basketball there. I was sitting with Bill Feely, and he said, yep, I put that beam in right there. And so yes, it does result in a lot of local work.
This project is not even needed in the first place, so renovations can be done by local people. It doesn't require bonding capacities of millions and millions and millions of dollars for things that we need. So a project like this, and there really hasn't been, that I can think of, any other new big school building projects in this area. So when you look at how much money is going to go into the local system here that would benefit people, it's just not there. Most of these things are, if you look at the data, you look and see what's happened in these school projects, they're all contractors and architects and big building firms from out of the area. To say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to have local people and this is a great big chubby hug and we'll all put this money into the local economy. It just hasn't happened, and it's very unlikely to happen with this project.
alrighty, that's going to be the final question. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes now to give your final arguments, your closing statements. Dan, you open up first, so we're going to let Steve go first with closing. Unless, Steve, I'll give you the option, unless you want to go last.
You can go first, Dan, that's fine.
All right, so Dan, you can close first, then we'll let Steve close.
Well, I think I've been all over the major points and concerns that we had about the cost of the levy being so exorbitant, and the effect that it's going to have just on our local citizens that are barely making ends meet at this point. And so I speak for folks that either can't speak or are afraid to speak up about it. I don't consider myself not one of these folks that has lots of experience at this, but I see a problem and people talk to me about it. So I said, well, if no one steps up, then things will suffer. So my whole point in coming and talking and opposing this is I think I speak for the people that can't speak up, and it's going to hit them so hard, and that effect will affect local businesses. You folks are about businesses in the community here. How do you think sucking $47 million out of our local community that's not going to be here is going to affect them? I think there was a fellow that said, "What's that giant sucking sound?" You remember that? Well, that's what we have here. We need to take this project in small, not smaller chunks, as they say, but renovation, looking at it from that aspect. And we can do what's needed with the facilities that we have here right now. And so I would ask people to not support this levy, and we need to go back to the drawing board. Look what happened in the $98 million situation. The school is still there. They still got pipes. Supposedly they're all plugged up. We've got all these problems, and it's going to fall down and so forth, and it's unreinforced. But that's just been like gone. It's gone away. It's still there. So now we've got another shiny penny to run after. And I say, no, we need to take a step back, and I'll be happy to work with them for the right actual facilities that we need.
Thank you. And now Steve.
I need you all to please start humming the battle hymn of the Republic as I do my patriotic speech here. It does affect small businesses. It affects my small business when people don't want to come here. But in America, we have a system of public education that's unlike any that has ever been. And it's been the very backbone of our democracy and our civic life. And while it is imperfect, the consistency and the access to every child, regardless of their economic situation, and the common use of that system by families from all social strata is one of the things that has given us our common experiences and our core values. And kids say the Pledge of Allegiance every day, together, every day. They and their families go to school sporting events together in the evenings and on the weekends. Schools have identities, they have friendly rivalries. It doesn't happen that way in other countries, and we sometimes take that for granted. Our grandparents and our parents, who often came from harder circumstances, saw very clearly the power of the common good that could come of having a consistently educated population. And they provided it for us, and it's our duty to pay it forward to future generations. And I feel very strongly about this. And so do the teachers and the administrators and the boards of directors in public schools. For them, it's much more common for it to be a moral duty for them, as it is a job or a volunteering opportunity. So let's get beyond questioning each other's motivation about the various details of a facilities plan. We, all of us, I think, want what's best for kids, and I believe that in spite of our disagreements over the methods or the cost structures, we must at some point act. And nobody's plans are going to be perfect, but it's important that we don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. The thing our past generations started for us is critical to our own future, both in the near term and the long, and it shouldn't be cheapened. And it's our duty to share the sacrifice that it takes to keep it strong and vibrant. This is a good plan, it's a practical plan, it's long-term, it's step-by-step, it's pay-as-we-go, it handles as many facilities as we can with as much benefit to teaching and learning as we reasonably can. It's realistic, and it's a direct response to the concerns of our voters. I'm a yes, and I hope you are too.
Alrighty. So with that, everybody, I think, please give them a hand, because it's not easy sitting up here in front of people and answering questions like that, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to do it. You both did a great job. We're all more informed. A well-informed voter is a good voter. So, with that said, there's nothing else. Next week is going to be Nathan West from the city talking about the 2018, talking about the future, how things are going. And I look forward to seeing you guys there. If there's nothing else, we are.